Hi, my name is Daniel, and this is the Engineering Success Podcast, episode 64, the long and awaited interview of Gina Covarrubias. I am so grateful for Gina for her time spent recording this interview and her patience in my time trying to rebuild this episode. Before we get into it, I want to give a quick shout out to Leroy Jenkins and John Ott. Thank you both so much for being top tier supporters of the podcast. Because of you, I'm able to afford my website, www.engringsuccess.com, where you can email me at daniel@engringsuccess.com. And if you want to be featured on the podcast, you want to be my guest, you have a question you want me to address on the podcast during a mailbag episode, just fire me an email there, and I will do my best to respond to it. I have responded to people. I have been helping coach people as my time, my schedule allows through different situations, career transitions, trying to find jobs, preparing for interviews. I have been doing that, so make sure to reach out to me at daniel@engineeringsuccess.com. Yeah, this is a very exciting episode 64. So it's a little bit of background. So Gina and I recorded this episode over a month ago, and I had just filmed my in-person interview with Luke, so I changed my microphone settings, and because of that, I took added a noise filter, and the result is whenever I recorded this episode with Gina, a large portion of my audio was cut out. So I have done my best to recreate my audio and remaster the episode to make it as seamless as possible, but it is essentially the exact same conversation that we had. It was a wonderful conversation about the relationship to work, career, and life, and that's it's going to be a great episode. So please listen to this episode. You will get a lot out of it. Speaking of life, things are good here. Baby E had their first birthday. I had my birthday, which was exciting. Baby E was dedicated at church. We had all of our family in town. That was really fun. Probably like top 5 weekends of my life. It was just all around an amazing weekend. Nothing. I mean, obviously you had the moment with the baby getting dedicated, but I mean, just there was not one singular moment other than that made it so great. I mean, that made it great. But I don't know, it's just one of those things where just like the weekend just goes really well. And I was just happy for the entire weekend. And I haven't had a weekend that happy in a long time. So thank you to my friends and family that made that possible. Okay, well, you're here to listen to engineering career topics. So without any further ado, I'll kick it over into the intro of Gina. My guest on today's podcast is an experienced engineer, author, keynote speaker, and STEM life coach for aspiring engineers. Gina Covarrubias graduated from Purdue University with her Bachelor's of Science in Aerospace, Aeronautical, and Astronautical Engineering. Then she started her career in the defense industry working for Orbital ATK, now part of Northrop Grumman, and continued her path as an aerospace engineer working for companies such as Belcan and the Defense Contract Management Agency. Oh yeah, and somewhere along the way there, she also got a master's. Today, I am so excited to host Gina on the Engineering Success Podcast to talk about her engineering journey, career evolution, and the exciting things she's doing now with her coaching and speaking business, Deliberate Doing. Gina, how are you doing today?
Hello, Daniel. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here talking to you.
Yeah, how was your week? What were you doing deliberately this?
What I was doing deliberately is I was doing a lot of coaching this week. I had a couple clients I picked up a few weeks ago. So when the coaching ramps up, then other things might get set aside a little bit, and that's just kind of how it works when you're multitasking,
Makes
which
sense.
is great.
Makes sense. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk about your journey through engineering and I guess away from engineering into coaching. But so this is an engineering career podcast. So I am interested in learning how you came to study engineering. Why did you choose engineering growing up? When did you know that you wanted to be an engineer?
I knew when I was a very young child, Daniel. I'm probably um, putting myself in the rare category, but since I was a kid, there was no doubt in my mind. I knew I wanted to grow up, work in the aero field somehow, some way. And because I loved math and science so much in high school, it seemed like a natural fit. So I didn't really have to contemplate anything, to be honest.
Makes sense. Were you one of those? Did you do like rocketry, or did you make rockets when you were a kid to kind of foster that desire to be an
Not at
engineer?
all. Not at
No, you
all.
just knew you were going to be an aerospace engineer.
I was more of a dreamer.
Yeah,
I would just fantasize in my mind. I would watch planes go by over our house. I would gaze at the stars at night, and I was just a big dreamer.
makes sense. And then how did you
Yeah.
end up picking Purdue? I know it has a phenomenal engineering program, but what went into picking Purdue for you?
Yes, that was also a no-brainer. I was born and raised in the state of Indiana, and Purdue was an hour and a half away. So for me, I thought, why would I spend extra money going to school somewhere out of state? So that's kind of the game that I played. How
Yeah,
can I not spend as much money? And so I stayed in state, and Purdue was the obvious choice.
yeah. You mentioned you were a dreamer growing up. Were you also a pretty good student in high school? Did that kind of contribute? Were you one of those STEM students that everybody kind of, I guess, praises in traditional high school, primary school structure?
um, I was definitely thought of as the brain.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, I was labeled as one of the brains. People wanted to sit next to me in class for obvious reasons.
yeah,
So I kind of had a label, yes.
yeah. And did that carry over to college, or was there a shift?
Oh boy, was there a shift. Um, I thought I was prepared.
Yeah.
And just for the audience sake, I decided to stay at home and start going to local college. There was a Purdue satellite campus very close
Okay.
by, and I wanted to live at home and save money and save um, tuition. I didn't want to pay room and board. Yeah, I was fine living at home, so I wanted to do that and start my collegiate career. And I was caught off guard, Daniel. It was so much more demanding than I thought.
Really? So, was there anything that you had to do to change your approach to school and how you did academics in general? Did you make a change or an adjustment?
I did. That's such a good question. I did. And I made some tough choices and I decided I can't really handle this right now. I'm, 18, I'm 19 years old and I'm taking these really tough basic engineering courses that really hit me like a brick. I wasn't prepared the way I thought I was. And so I started going to school on a part-time basis.
Oh, really?
stayed
Wow.
stayed living at home and started working to try to earn money to pay for the school, and so that's what I did for a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah,
So how long did it take you to graduate?
it took me 8 years to get my bachelor's degree.
Wow. We had a
Yeah.
pre-call before this, and I didn't even know that that was the case. And you were working part-time while you were going through school. How'd you feel about that?
For the first couple of years it was great, it was fine, I was making money, I was able to work and take part-time classes, and I was able to juggle all of that
Yeah.
while living at home for free, so that was great. Eventually, I had to transfer to the main campus of Purdue, which was about an hour and a half away because the satellite campus did not offer aerospace engineering.
Okay.
And I'm going to snicker, I'm going to chuckle when I say this. No offense to the mechanical engineers, but the closest thing would have been mechanical engineering. And for me, that wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I had to be in the aero program. So
Yeah.
eventually I transferred. And that
Yeah.
was, oh, that was a whole nother shock. I wasn't ready for that.
Really? Did you go full time after you transferred, or did you also stay
Yes.
part time? Okay. You went full time. Wow. So, what would you say to somebody that's in the same situation, trying to decide if they want to slow down or try to power through? What do you think about the path that you took? Would you recommend it to somebody else?
I would encourage anybody to go at a pace that is most comfortable for them.
Yeah.
So maybe it takes you a couple extra years to graduate. You know what? In the big scheme of life, that is no big deal. Do what feels most comfortable for you.
Yeah. That's great advice. Well, what were you involved in other than working part time? When you got there full time, did you join any clubs or anything like that?
I did. I tried to um, volunteer for uh, leadership opportunities or get involved in some student organizations so that I could put that on my resume in addition to my classes. So yeah, I became pretty heavily involved in the minority engineering program. I became involved in the Society of Women Engineers, and I would encourage people to also try to get some kind of community activity as
Yeah,
well on your resume if possible.
I agree wholeheartedly. So we talked about the Society of Women Engineers. What was your experience as a woman in engineering? Was it a generally positive experience? Were there a bunch of other women in your classes? What was your experience being a woman studying engineering?
It was all positive,
Yeah.
Daniel. And I was also pleasantly surprised that there were more females in my classes than I actually expected.
Wow.
And it was great. Yeah, it was a very very good thing. So no issues whatsoever in that
Yeah.
area.
So you would never discourage a woman from pursuing engineering because it's a generally male dominated field.
So no, I would only discourage anybody from going into engineering, whether they're male or female, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Only if they realize, you know what, this maybe this isn't right for me. Maybe this is really not what I should be doing.
Yeah.
In that case, if you have doubt, if you're forcing yourself, that is not most likely that will not produce a great result for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the reason why the engineering dropout rate is so high anyways is because so many people do try out engineering and try to see if it's for them and then they realize it's not and then they drop it and that's okay. They're making the right decision for them.
Yes, and there's nothing wrong with there's no shame in that whatsoever. And sometimes you don't know until you get there.
Yeah, exactly. So, were there any classes for you that really resonated with you or that were your favorite classes or the most applicable to your career?
I would say one of my favorite classes, and this was before knowing anything about a career. I never
Yeah.
had an internship, so I didn't really know what a job even looked like or what it involved. But one of my favorite classes was spacecraft dynamics. I really got into that, and it was in our class. It was one of the label. It was labeled as one of the most difficult, one of the harder courses to take, and it was
Yeah.
optional. I didn't have to take it, but I did because I found it interesting, and I ended up loving the class and getting an A in it. But I think spacecraft dynamics was just really resonated with me.
Yeah. So is it like a dynamics course but with gravity or like what was spacecraft dynamics?
It was all about how do you take the spacecraft out that's out in space, and how do you maneuver it with no gravity? Like, what are you supposed to do to make it go the way you want it to go and to make it
Yeah.
turn when you want it to turn? So it was, to me, it was fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
and it was tough. No doubt about it. It was tough.
So did you ever get to apply any of that? Did you ever end up working for a group that did stuff with spacecraft?
I did not
Yeah.
ever end up applying it,
Yeah.
um, which is just kind of the way things worked out,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Yeah. So after you finished your bachelor's, you started your master's at Purdue, and then eventually you transferred to Utah because you got a job, which it's kind of interesting. I think a theme of your career is that you're always working. Seems like while you were in school, and your job was with Orbital ATK, which I guess has been bought up by Northrop Grumman. How'd you get your first job?
I got my first job because of my first internship. And so again, I fall in the rare category. I don't think most people do what I did. But after my bachelor's degree, I went straight into my master's at Purdue, which is what you said a moment ago. And then I ended up getting an internship after my first year of graduate school. So I worked for that summer and decided I loved it so much. I wanted to move out there. I wanted to start working. they were happy to offer me a full-time job because I already had my bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
So I ended up moving and working out there and finishing up my degree, which of course it took longer because I had to go on a part-time basis, but
Yeah.
I finished after a couple of years. And yeah, it's tough to do that, especially when your friends are out having fun
Yeah.
during the weekends. And the last thing you want to do is come home and study some more.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
stayed with them for 4 years, it looks like from looking at your resume. And you really loved it. Then you left. So why'd you leave, why'd you move on to Belcan after that?
Yeah. Yeah. Belcan is located in Indianapolis. Uh,
Oh, so going back home.
so I missed home, Daniel. That's what it came down to. I missed seeing family, especially my parents. So I wanted to move closer to home.
And did you enjoy that working for Belcan? And for those that don't know, I believe that they're a subcontractor that supports Rolls-Royce in building airplane engines.
Yes. So Rolls-Royce in Indianapolis does a lot of work with a lot of their legacy engines.
Yeah.
I can't really sit here and say that they um, are designing like new and upcoming things. It's more about maintenance and aftermarket.
Yeah.
And so Belcan is a major contractor, and that was new for me. Is to work on site at a major company like
Yeah.
Rolls Royce as a contractor. So that also brought some different kind of thoughts and I wouldn't say obstacles, but a different perspective for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. I mean, yeah, you're kind of not your facility. You have your company's culture, but you have other company's
Hmm.
culture. There's maybe multiple cultures that are all kind of coming together and intersecting in the same place. And I can only imagine that that creates a level of friction.
Well, there is a little bit of friction, but in my case, it actually always worked out
Yeah.
perfectly.
Oh,
I
wow.
had no problems um, working on site at
Yeah.
Rolls Royce, integrating myself into the project team or wherever I was sitting, whoever I was working with. I had many different kinds of jobs, and that was a really nice benefit I learned of being a contractor is you could switch it up pretty easily. If someone's willing to bring you on their team, it's a done deal.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go through like the normal bureaucracy that you would if you were a full-time employee. So that was a definite bonus.
Yeah. And did you enjoy program project management, the kind of less technical side of the industry?
You bring up a really good point. I started out in my very early days as a very, very technical
Yeah.
engineer. I was a structural analyst, and then I kind of moved over to the quality side of things because I wanted to be closer to hardware and actually be able to see things. And so eventually I made my way over to project engineering, which turned into scheduling and risk management, which turned into program management. So I really was very privileged to be able to experience a whole spectrum of very technical and then all the way over to very administrative kind of work.
Yeah. And so then you get to see the entire spectrum of the engineering industry. And then, despite that, you decide to leave Belkin and go back to Purdue to be an academic advisor in their engineering department. What gives?
Yes, yes. It wasn't just an academic advisor, Daniel.
Yeah.
It was a position to be an advisor for the very program, the Aero program that I had graduated from.
Oh,
And so I decided, you know what, that actually sounds like it sounds closer to my dream job than being a typical engineer, working one on one with students, getting to counsel them, getting to advise them, talking to them about the classes, the problems that they're having, and helping them in that regard to me sounded absolutely amazing. I jumped at the opportunity. I couldn't turn it down, even though it was, I'm going to say it out loud, I took a hefty salary cut. for
Oh, I
that.
can imagine. I can
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. So why? Why were you willing to take the salary cut?
Um, because in my mind, it was the kind of duties and tasks seemed to me closer to what I really wanted to be doing, which was not so much the engineering and the administrative, but more so developing people and helping people with their journey and their struggles. So that's why I did it.
So you do that for about 3-ish years, and then you actually go back to the industry. You do a short stint at Belcan, then you work for the Defense Contract Management Agency. Why did you go back to industry, and what did you learn about yourself in this stint going back to industry?
I went back into industry because after a couple of years working in academia on campus, I realized, at least I told myself, that I was maxed out. And I told myself, based on the experiences I had working there, that if I wanted to move up in any sort of way, I needed a PhD to do that,
Yeah,
because that's really what they value there in the world of academia. They value PhDs, they value research, and that was not something that I had any desire to do. And so I thought, well, I can't really, I can't move up here. I mean, I can move vertically or I can move horizontally, pardon me, but I can't move up vertically. So I thought, you know what? I'll just go back to industry then. So that's what I did.
and then you went back to the industry, and you did that for about 3 more years, and then you left the industry altogether and started deliberate doing what you do now as an engineering life coach. So, what was the moment that you realized that, you know what, this is not for me? I need to go off on my own way and start deliberate doing.
It wasn't one moment, Daniel. It was after starting to work in Indianapolis again, and this time for DCMA, for the government. I ran into the same challenge that I had at Purdue, which was, as long as I'm here, I cannot move up. There's nowhere, there is no up, there is nowhere to go. I would have
Yeah.
to relocate if I wanted to move up. And I thought, okay, I really don't feel like moving to Washington, DC to try to move up the chain. If I stay here and do what I'm doing in this job, at least what I told myself at the time is that I'm going to be doing this for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
There really wasn't too many opportunities in the office. And over the course of a couple of months, I realized, you know what, I could stay here. I could find another job somewhere else, either in industry or government. But you know what, Gina? I think it's time to try something else. I think you've seen enough. I think you've done enough. I think you've met enough people along the way to understand what you would be leaving behind.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And it took a few months to come to that conclusion, Daniel, and it did not come lightly.
And you're right. I mean, you worked in the most technical of technical roles there are for the OEM or for the owner, working for Northrop Grumman. You worked for Orbital. You worked for a contractor in a more programmatic role, and you worked for Belcan supporting Rolls-Royce. You even worked for the universities that help train the engineers. And then you even worked for the government, which issues out government contracts, and you got the contracting side. You basically ran the entire gamut of the engineering industry, and you explored all those roles and realized they're not for you. So, what kind of people, I guess I'm kind of stealing your thunder here, but what kind of advice or would you give to people that are looking to find that niche or thread the needle on where they belong in the engineering industry?
I struggled so much with that question, Daniel, during my profession. What
Yeah.
what is it I'm supposed to be doing? What is my niche? What am I meant to be doing? I could never figure it out. The common thread, the pattern that I see looking back is that I made a grave mistake of always believing that whatever my job was supposed to make me happy in life. I always believed there was a dream job somewhere out there. If I just looked hard enough, if I just meticulously applied to the right job, I'll find it and it's going to make me happy. And I chased that pattern my whole career. And the more I couldn't find it, the more elusive it became, the more frustrated and unhappy I became. So that is my word of caution for anybody who thinks their job is supposed to be the end all and solve all their problems and make all their dreams come true. That's a very dangerous game to play.
Yeah. And that sounds a lot like what you do now for your clients with deliberate doing. So, transferring into that, can you give us a high level of what you do with deliberate doing and what your mission is and what you do for your clients?
Yes, thank you for asking. At a very, very high level, Daniel, my mission as a life coach is to help engineers or any professional, to be honest, create goals and reach the goals. That's what a coach does. They help someone reach their goals. Now, a lot of people don't have an idea of what their goals are. Some people do have an idea of their goals for their careers, but they don't know how to get there. We could go on, but at a very high level, that is what I do. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make as I talk to them through my coaching sessions or as I go and speak to groups at conferences, one of the biggest mistakes people make is the same mistake that I made in my own career, which was they are looking to their job to fulfill some kind of need that they have. And when the job doesn't end up doing that for them, then they're in a world of hurt and they don't know what to do about it. Or they might turn around and blame the job. They might blame people at the job. And you could go down many different rabbit holes. You could spiral quickly if you allow yourself to do that. So my purpose is to help people avoid the same mistakes that I made.
Yeah. Are there certain directions you try to redirect them towards whenever they're trying to find their purpose as I guess the main approach to combat that?
Oh, thank you for asking that. What a great question. My job as a coach, Daniel, is not to direct them to go this way or that way at
Yeah.
all. That is not my style as a coach. Some coaches
Yeah.
may do that. My job is to help them unravel some of the weaknesses or some of the areas of improvement that they need to work on internally. Once they can unravel those and admit to those, then I help them strengthen their own foundation from within, because what I will say is that any external relationship, like your relationship with a job or a career, is always based on your internal relationship with yourself. And when you're not right with yourself, then everything you see out there, all of your experiences, are going to come back in a negative kind of way. So now we're getting a little bit into the weeds. We're getting a little bit more advanced. So if people can understand what I just said, then they will understand how I operate as a coach and how I could help them.
And another thing that you have on your website is your guide, a guide to managing your career, expectations, purpose, and happiness. What's the purpose of that guide and what can people get out of it?
Yes, thank you. I have two guides actually
Yeah.
that people can download from my website. And the first one is the one you just mentioned.
Yeah.
It's simply a very high level guide of some items to keep in mind as you move along in your career. And so the whole purpose of the guide is to get people thinking about, okay, this is where I am. This is my perspective on happiness in the workplace. Am I maybe coming up with some unrealistic expectations? Am I expecting too much? So the guide is meant to challenge people's thoughts around having a career and what they expect. Because when we expect too much, then we're setting ourselves up to be disappointed. And then the
That's
other guide walks people through my new book that I released this year called Career Purpose When Work Isn't Working for You. And it's basically, Daniel, at a very high level, again, it's a summary of each chapter. I've got 8 chapters in the book. And so it's a quick summary of what the book is about. Again, it's meant to challenge people and the way they think about their careers so that they could perhaps open doors and think about things in a different way that they hadn't considered before. And if the career purpose chapter by chapter guide makes sense, if people want to learn more, they can find my book on Amazon.
Thank you for that. And I'll make sure to have a link to your book in the description as well for those that are interested in finding out more about your book. So, other than, I guess, trying to take too much from work or derive too much happiness or self worth from work, what are some other things that people come to you with that they're struggling with?
So one thing I hear a lot, Daniel, people will come to me and say, I don't know if I want to stay in engineering.
Really?
They really struggle with, am I supposed to be an engineer? I don't, all these things are happening and things aren't going according to my plan. And, management is just so dysfunctional and on and on and on. And they think that maybe they're in the wrong industry. And I can identify with that because that was
Yeah.
me at one point.
So, how often is it that they're not in the right industry? Is it more often than not? Or
Mm. Oh, you have such good questions. So, with that particular group of people that I
yeah.
have coached in the last 5.5 years that I've been coaching, after I work with them one on one, Daniel, and we do the really tough work to help them kind of recalibrate where they are in life, 100% of them have decided to stay right where they are.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Why? Is there a thread here? I mean, okay, I would
Mm.
have guessed that it would be 100% the other way around, given your experience.
The thread, Daniel, is that they realized the issues and the problems that they're experiencing, it's not unique to engineering. That's
Yeah.
unique to anybody who goes to work on a day to day basis.
Yeah.
So the thread was that they now had tools to use in a giant toolbox after working with me to say, oh, now I know how to deal with that person. Oh, okay, now I know how to deal with this project or
Yeah.
with this obstacle that I wasn't planning on having in
Yeah.
my life. Now I can deal with these things.
Yeah. That's great. And it I was just thinking about like the American society as a whole. I'm trying to think. I just know. I don't know about you, but I know some. They get one degree, work in a career job. It's not fulfilling enough for them. So then they go back to school. They get another degree, or they chase a certification in this or certification in that, so they can get this job. They don't like this job either. They don't like this job, and then they don't like this job, and they spend all this money and time, effort chasing the perfect job. Next thing you know, they're 60. They're never going to be able to retire because they spent all this money and time not making any growth in the career that they had. Sounds like it's pretty valuable to many people to, I guess, find a way to enjoy the career that they do have. Obviously, it doesn't mean don't ever switch, but man, you're right. I mean, so many people in our society, they spend their entire lives chasing fulfillment and purpose and value from their career. and they don't find it.
Absolutely, I agree with you 1,000%. That was me during my
Yeah.
career. I went through, phases, but that absolutely was me. And what my book does for people, Daniel, is it helps them find meaning and purpose in their day to day,
Yeah.
wherever they are. It doesn't matter if you plan on leaving. It doesn't matter if you're just okay with your job. It doesn't matter if you're even employed or not. My book opens up people's eyes to help them say, "Oh, okay, this is what really matters, not that other thing that I thought that matters."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that. I just recently became a father. That alone definitely also changed
Oh,
my brain. Yeah, just
congratulations.
like the book, maybe in a way, it definitely changed my brain chemistry around the way I
Absolutely.
view work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Well, good for you.
Yeah, yeah. And then sure enough, less than a year later, I changed jobs. That's not directly related, but one of the things we talked about in one of our earlier conversations was the idea of don't get attached. Why don't we circle back on that one more time?
It's a great thing to bring up.
Yeah,
My book is all about attachment to your career, and
yeah,
attachment in this case means you rely on your career to bring you a certain emotion, to fill a certain emotional void. It could
yeah.
be happiness, it could be validation, it could be respect, um, and there's a real danger to living your life that way.
All right, I think we've kind of touched on everything from the topic agenda. I know that you host a lot of corporate events, you do a lot of professional speaking as a keynote speaker and hosting seminars and stuff. How else can people engage with you and get connected with you?
Thank you. They can email me anytime, Gina@deliberatedoing.com, and that's Gina. I always offer free coaching up front. If anybody wants to see if it works for them, to see if we gel, they can get to know me and my style, so they don't have to commit to anything up front. So, one-on-one coaching, if someone's interested, please send me an email. I love speaking. I love getting in front of groups. I love professional development and teaching it to people. So again, Gina@deliberatedoing.com. Email me anytime.
Well, thank you, Gina. I think that's our agenda. Anything else from me that I've missed?
No, thank you so much. You asked phenomenal questions. I really appreciate your time and attention. And I hope your audience is going to listen to this and think about um, the way they approach their careers.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to close with this. As somebody who has had his entire dynamic calculation relationship with work change within the last year, and again, I didn't have a terrible dynamic, but it's changed. I would say that if you haven't had that experience, then it's worth investing time, energy into trying to have an analysis on how you feel about work and what you get from work, whether it be taking advantage of the resources that we talked about here at Gina's website, getting yourself set up with a coach like Gina or Gina. It's worth dedicating that time because if you haven't had that watershed moment like I have, I would say it's a very liberating and freeing experience, and I encourage you to dedicate some time and energy on that.
Very well said, Daniel. I agree with you 100%. Thank you for letting your audience know
Yeah.
that there's more to life than work and career, for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, thanks, Gina, for sharing your career journey.
Thank you, Daniel. This was great.
Well, guys, that was a perfectly good hour of the Engineering Success Podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it, got something out of it. If you did, make sure to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, share it with somebody that you think would get something out of it, and consider being a top tier supporter. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I'm miscommunicating. I just made a pilot, then they threw me on the stations. Nah, I'm not complaining. Nah, I'm not complaining. My thoughts get complicated. I cannot explain in lameness. Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payments. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries. Thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify. They put me on the station.